The Shadow of Treachery. I invite you to experience my new tale of betrayal, honor, and retribution. Support with a subscription if it resonates with your soul. Chapter 1: Shards of the Past. My life ceased to have meaning the moment a Syrian mortar fragment lodged itself 2 millimeters from my heart. I, Raymond Shepard, a 52-year-old former intelligence officer, received what amounted to a 12-year stay of execution. The inevitable cardiac arrest would have claimed me sooner were it not for Elizabeth, the same woman who later traded my trust for an Italian arms dealer's promises and betrayed the nation I had sacrificed everything to protect. Today, on the sun-drenched Amalfi Coast, fate orchestrated a meeting with Nathaniel Collins, the son of my fallen commander. Before the metallic intruder completes its journey through my chest, I require his assistance, not to preserve my rapidly fatting existence, but to reclaim something far more valuable, the tattered remnants of my honor. Positano welcomed me with a peculiar blend of beauty and suffocation, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine and salt, reminiscent of an interrogation where anxiety precedes the first question. I sat on the terrace of La Serena, gazing at the Mediterranean's azure expanse below. Dr. Rosenthal gave me approximately 4 weeks. The fragment moved incrementally closer with each heartbeat, a countdown as precise as it was merciless. My 12-year reprieve approached its conclusion, with the inevitability of a Greek tragedy. The Brunello wine warmed my palate but left my soul untouched by its renowned splendor. The symphony of waves intermingled with tourists' carefree laughter, young souls blissfully unaware that their uncomplicated happiness was purchased at great cost by those who had sacrificed their innocence on altars of distant conflicts. It was then that I observed him. Tall, carrying himself with unmistakable military discipline and watchful eyes, he stood apart from the leisurely crowds like a sentinel among sleepers. Perhaps 27, possibly 28, perusing the menu, yet acutely aware of my sustained attention. Our eyes connected across the terrace, and I recognized in his gaze the shadow of the man who had preserved my life 12 years earlier in the dust-choked streets of Damascus. I raised my glass in silent invitation. He hesitated no more than a heartbeat, assessing, calculating, deciding. The blood of a strategist flowed through his veins. "May I join you?" His voice carried a quiet certainty. "Please," I motioned toward the vacant chair opposite me. "Alexander Wright." I extended my hand. The handshake reveals more than words ever could. His grip conveyed assurance and restraint, the handshake of someone who understood the weight of actions and their consequences. Not the casual connection of a banker or consultant, but the measured acknowledgement of one accustomed to consequential decisions. "Nathaniel Collins," he responded, "though most call me Nate." "I'm aware." I allowed myself the slightest smile. "You possess your father's discerning gaze and resolute profile." He tensed perceptibly. The appropriate response: mistrust toward a stranger who possesses unwarranted familiarity. "You knew my father." I extracted from my linen jacket a photograph, edges softened by years of handling. 3 officers and a commander, battle-worn and vigilant, standing on a rooftop in Damascus as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across a city teetering between order and chaos. I indicated the distinguished figure at center. "I knew him intimately. We served together in Syria. Your father, Commander Collins, saved my life during the extraction from Damascus, earned the Intelligence Star, posthumously." His fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as he accepted the photograph. Recognition, sorrow, and pride converged in his expression. I had observed this same image prominently displayed on the mantelpiece at the Collins residence when I visited William a fortnight before our final deployment. "I didn't anticipate encountering you here," I continued, "but perhaps the universe operates with more deliberate design than we credit it." He returned the photograph with reverence. "Is life treating you well, Nathaniel? A companion, perhaps?" "No, my focus remains on completing my doctoral work. University, research, occasional distractions. Nothing of significant attachment. A wise approach, I signaled discreetly to the sommelier, requested another bottle of Brunello. Marriage requires careful consideration. I rushed toward it. Now I bear the consequences of that impulsivity. Bitterness infiltrated my voice, impossible to disguise. I consumed the remaining wine in a single motion. Do you know what exceeds the pain of betrayal? I met his gaze directly. The methodical, daily degradation inflicted by one to whom you've entrusted your existence. I fell silent, contemplating the Mediterranean. The sun descended gradually, transforming the water into a canvas of crimson and gold. Nathaniel maintained his silence, demonstrating the patience that distinguished exceptional operatives, understanding when silence extracts more truth than questioning. Would you care to elaborate? He nudged a bread basket toward me. Perhaps it might serve as a cautionary narrative. I poured 2 glasses of the newly arrived Brunello. I'll relate how profound affection can transmute into a slow-acting poison that gradually consumes your essence, and how a seemingly inconsequential encounter in Positano 18 months ago systematically dismantled everything I had constructed. He settled back in his chair. Something in his demeanor suggested receptiveness not born of courtesy, but from recognition of significance. His father's perceptiveness lived on in him. 18 months passed. Elizabeth and I journeyed here to commemorate 25 years of marriage. I rotated the wine glass between my fingers, observing how the light fractured through the crystal. A quarter century, a milestone that statistics suggest only one relationship in 4 achieves. I desired something extraordinary for her, a return to our youthful exuberance. Earlier in our relationship, Italy held special significance for us. We'd explored its hidden corners, meandered through ancient ruins, experienced its distinctive regional cuisines. She particularly cherished the coastal villages. The wine imparted its complex notes upon my palate, though I scarcely registered its celebrated subtleties. 25 years, I reiterated. A silver anniversary, appropriately named, for it represents both achievement and reflective clarity. I arranged for the finest suite overlook the Mediterranean, reserved tables at establishments that require months of anticipation, commissioned a silver necklace from an artisan in Florence. I consumed another measure of wine, recalling that initial evening in Positano 18 months earlier. The air carried the same intoxicating blend of flowers and sea. Identical stars, identical waters. The curious aspect, I continued after an extended silence, is that it originated with this fragment. Here, I pressed my palm against my chest. A sliver of Syrian mortar casing that found its home near my heart after Damascus. Nathaniel leaned forward. Tell me about that day, about my father. I lowered my gaze, as though I could perceive through fine linen the ancient scar tissue. It was chaos crystallized into its purest form, Nathaniel. An extraction operation in Damascus. Intelligence indicated a high-value target held in a fortified compound. Your father commanded our unit, tasked with securing the target and coordinating immediate evacuation. I closed my eyes briefly, allowing recollection to manifest with renewed clarity. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with cordite and fear. We penetrated the compound, methodically cleared each chamber. In the underground section, Commander Collins advanced into what appeared to be an interrogation facility. I followed precisely 3 steps behind. I paused, recalling each millisecond of that fateful moment. Then I observed it, the mortar round penetrating through a narrow window shaft, descending directly toward your father's position. No opportunity for warning existed. Only reaction remained possible. My voice acquired the detached quality of formal testimony. I calculated the trajectory, executed a forward movement, displaced the commander from the impact zone. Protecting your father was imperative. Then, detonation. A moment of disconnection followed by extraordinary pain radiating through my torso. The fragmentation penetrated my tactical vest as though it were parchment. Your father dragged me to cover coordinated medical response. I experienced significant hemorrhaging but maintained consciousness. Observed as he orchestrated our extraction under deteriorating conditions. I regained composure before continuing. As the evacuation helicopter approached, a sniper engaged from an adjacent rooftop. A single round, precision targeting of the unprotected area above body armor. Your father collapsed beside me. I applied pressure to the wound, but the damage. I shook my head slightly. His final communication concerned you and your mother. Watch over my family, Ray. Honor endures beyond all else. I withdrew from my jacket, a weathered identification token. He intended for you to have this. I should have delivered it years ago, but I extended the token toward Nathaniel. I failed in fulfilling his final request, could not shield your mother from grief's devastation. And 18 months passed, I proved incapable of protecting even my own household. Nathaniel accepted the token, his grip so firm that the tendons in his hand became pronounced. Father never abandoned his principles, he stated quietly. Neither shall I. In the military hospital in Landstuhl, specialists determined that extracting the fragment presented unacceptable risk. Its proximity to the heart created an impossible surgical scenario. Continue your life with this condition, Mr. Shepard, but understand, at any moment the fragment could shift. Should that occur, medical intervention becomes futile. And it has shifted, Nathaniel inquired softly. 3 weeks ago, I confirmed with a slight nod. Dr. Rosenthal indicated I have approximately 1 month remaining. When the next cardiac event occurs, the fragment will penetrate the aortic wall. Exsanguination will follow within minutes. However, before that inevitability, my gaze returned to the sea. The sun had nearly completed its descent below the horizon, leaving a spectacular afterglow that seemed almost too perfect for the gravity of our conversation. Before that conclusion arrives, I wish to explain how a fragment of Syrian mortar led me to the most captivating woman I've ever encountered, and how she methodically transformed my existence into an exquisite form of psychological torment. Her name was Elizabeth, I began, the syllables now acrid upon my tongue like corroded metal. She served as a trauma specialist at Landstuhl Medical Center. My first conscious memory after surgery was her adjusting the dressings on my back, her movements precise yet gentle. I smiled at recollections that once provided comfort, but now carried only the sharp edge of disillusionment. Do you know what she remarked upon seeing the extent of my injuries? Someone must value you tremendously if you were willing to absorb such devastation in their place. I observed the rhythmic pattern of waves against the shoreline below, metronomic, inexorable, like the persistent discomfort that had become my constant companion. She differed from other medical personnel, didn't avert her gaze from disfigurement, demonstrated no apprehension regarding my nocturnal terrors. When nightmares propelled me into consciousness, she would sit beside the bed, her hand steadying mine until reality reasserted itself. I sampled the Brunello again. 7 weeks in that sterile environment, then rehabilitation, physical therapy. Pain dominated my days, psychological distress claimed my nights. Throughout that interminable process, she remained constant. You understand, Nathaniel, she transcended professional obligation. She perceived humanity where others observed only damaged tissue and compromised function. And you developed profound feelings for her, he stated rather than questioned. With the intensity of youth despite my advanced years, I acknowledged. Requested her contact information upon discharge. She laughed, that melodious sound I would come to cherish, and revealed she had already recorded it in my medical file. For follow-up purposes, she explained with charming professionalism that barely concealed mutual interest. I placed my glass upon the table, examining how the remaining wine caught the fatting light. We married 8 months later, a modest ceremony. Select colleagues from the agency, her associates from the medical center. She insisted I wear my formal attire despite the visible scars at my collar, stated she felt immense pride in joining her life with someone who understood sacrifice. I shook my head slightly at the memory. The initial years were gratifying, challenging certainly, but fundamentally gratifying. I attempted to resume operational status, recertification programs, physical assessments, endured considerable discomfort but satisfied all requirements. Elizabeth supported these efforts, expressed understanding that service formed an essential component of my identity. For a moment I fell silent, recalling the first cardiac incident. Then, during a routine qualification exercise, the fragment shifted for the first time. I collapsed during a physical evaluation, experiencing a sensation comparable to a blade twisting between my ribs. Medical authority insisted upon immediate and permanent withdrawal from field operations. I regarded Nathaniel directly. Do you comprehend what presents the greatest challenge to someone in our profession? Not external threats or physical danger. Rather, the recognition that one's body has betrayed one's purpose, that physical limitation has overridden dedication and capability. How did Elizabeth respond to this development? Initially, she embodied perfection in her support. This represents a transition, not a conclusion, Raymond, she would assure me. We will navigate this together. I secured a position as an intelligence instructor, reduced compensation but continued contribution. Subsequently, advisory role with a veterans advocacy organization, assisting others like myself in reconciling operational experience with civilian requirements. I finished my wine and refreshed both our glasses. But as years accumulated, the physical discomfort intensified rather than diminished. Pharmaceutical interventions, injections, physical rehabilitation, nothing provided sustained relief. I observed Elizabeth's progressive weariness, not merely with my condition but with my fundamental character. The principles she once admired she eventually described as rigidly anachronistic. Principles remain eternally relevant, Nathaniel commented softly. Precisely my position, I nodded in acknowledgement. But for Elizabeth, I transformed from respected professional to perpetual obligation. She assigned blame for our inability to have children. The fragmentation damage extended beyond my thoracic cavity. I interrupted my own narrative, reluctant to elaborate on intimate details. She criticized the years dedicated to service, the modest financial provision, our inability to acquire more expansive accommodation, the limitations on international leisure travel. I consumed another measure of wine, sensing bitterness rising that had nothing to do with the beverage's tannins. 18 months ago, I determined to rectify matters, consolidated our financial resources, reserved this very resort where we had spent our honeymoon, presented her with a handcrafted silver necklace. Let us return to Positano, I suggested, commemorate our silver anniversary where we experienced such profound connection. I gazed at the Mediterranean twilight, the sky reminiscent of a watercolor where blues and purples bleed into one another. She agreed, and momentarily I believed I detected a glimmer of our former connection in her expression, that perhaps reconciliation remained possible. I laughed with subtle bitterness. What remarkable self-deception I practiced. It was our second day in Positano, I continued after a reflective pause. We were enjoying the late morning beside the infinity pool. Elizabeth appeared relaxed, almost content. I believed, perhaps we were indeed rekindling what had been temporarily misplaced. I rubbed my temples, as though attempting to erase the visual memory. Then he approached our lounge chairs, tall, elegantly tanned, perhaps early 50s, linen shirt casually open at the collar, Swiss timepiece worth more than a year of my pension, silver-streaked hair artfully styled. Sophisticated, self-assured, exuding an unmistakable magnetism. Alessandro Morti, Nathaniel interjected. At that initial meeting, he introduced himself as a gallery owner from Milan, I confirmed with a nod. Immediately commenced flattering Elizabeth with remarkable precision. Her appearance, her discerning taste in literature which he somehow observed from the book beside her chair, ordered vintage champagne, insisted upon our company. My grip tightened around the stem of my glass until I feared it might shatter. Elizabeth responded to his attention with extraordinary animation. Her laughter, her engaged posture, her subtle physical responses. I hadn't witnessed her so vitally present in years. Initially, I attributed no significance to these observations. Appreciation of one's spouse by others can provide validation. I shook my head slightly. By evening, he had extracted our complete narrative: residence, professions, marriage duration. And then, when Elizabeth departed to prepare for dinner, he leaned toward me and delivered words that would initiate the dismantling of my world. I maintained unwavering eye contact with Nathaniel. "Mr. Shepherd," he stated with clinical detachment, "your wife is absolutely exquisite. Tonight I shall have her in my bed and you shall witness it. I wager she will consent with enthusiasm." The recollection assaulted me anew. I consumed the remaining wine in a single motion. I dismissed it as psychological provocation, perhaps assessment of my character. I anticipated Elizabeth's return, after which I would disclose his statement and she would respond appropriately. Events unfolded differently, Nathaniel observed quietly. Elizabeth returned wearing an evening dress I had never seen, revealing, elegantly provocative, a style she had not selected in perhaps a decade. She positioned herself beside him rather than me. Throughout dinner, she absorbed his anecdotes, responded enthusiastically to his humor, accepted his champagne with familiar ease. I fell silent, recalling my peripheral presence at that table, my gradual transformation into invisibility. By the conclusion of the meal, she permitted increasingly intimate contact, his hand upon hers, casual contact with her shoulder, her arm. He would occasionally glance in my direction, his expression containing unmistakable triumph. He recognized the imminent success of his proposition. I noticed my elevated heart rate, the responding discomfort from the fragment, a haunting reminder of mortality. I struggled to reconcile these observations with 25 years of shared existence. How could an encounter with a stranger within hours? I shook my head in lingering disbelief. I attempted to suggest returning to our suite, mentioned the lateness of the hour, my medication schedule. Elizabeth regarded me with unveiled irritation. "Go ahead, Raymond. I'll remain briefly. Alessandro has offered to show me his collection of Renaissance miniatures." I smiled without mirth. Renaissance miniatures, an elaborate pretense, and she employed it without hesitation or apparent conflict. I returned my attention to Nathaniel. I feigned acceptance, returned to our accommodation, remained awake anticipating her return. 1 hour elapsed, then 2, then 3. Her mobile phone remained unanswered. At 3:30, I could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and commenced searching the property. "Did you locate her?" Nathaniel inquired. I nodded, my expression hardening. "In his private villa on the grounds, illuminated, draperies unclosed. They hadn't bothered with discretion." That night I stood motionless on the terrace. My voice acquired mechanical qualities, as though reciting operational details rather than personal devastation. Observing the systematic destruction of my marriage. Most disturbing was her awareness of my presence. She looked toward the window, acknowledged my observation, continued nonetheless. I took another sip, registering nothing of the wine's character. At dawn I returned to our suite, contemplating appropriate responses: dissolution of marriage, confrontation, immediate departure, I was evaluating options when I received an electronic message. I retrieved my phone, opened an archived communication, a brief link to video content. I hesitated before showing Nathaniel, but procedural transparency seemed essential. Observe, she transmitted this that very night. The screen displayed Elizabeth with Alessandro, looking directly into the camera. Are you enjoying the performance, darling? You prefer observation to participation now, don't you? It's all you're capable of anymore. I terminated the video, unable to continue viewing. I telephoned her, demanded explanation, stated my immediate intention to confront them. What was her response? By all means, darling. Alessandro welcomes an audience. He finds observers stimulating. My hand clenched involuntarily. I secured transportation to his villa, experienced profound anger, prepared for physical confrontation despite my condition. What occurred next? I never reached the entrance. 3 individuals intercepted me, professional security personnel armed beneath tailored jackets. One displayed images on a mobile device, my sister departing her medical practice in Vermont, her children at their educational institution, their residence. Complete surveillance, schedules, routines. I took another measured sip. Signor Shepherd, one addressed me, the principal expects you. However, parameters must first be established. I met Nathaniel's increasingly troubled gaze. That moment revealed Alessandro Morti's actual identity, not a gallery proprietor from Milan, a principal figure in European arms trafficking, with extensive connections, resort management, local authorities, governmental officials, an individual with resources to conduct surveillance on my family and issue credible threats. You could have contacted American authorities, the consulate. I was in a foreign jurisdiction, Nathaniel, alone, with a compromised cardiovascular system, and Elizabeth, I shook my head slightly. She wasn't being coerced. She had made her selection. Nathaniel remained silent, processing this information. The security team escorted me to the villa. Alessandro and Elizabeth awaited, reclining on a sectional sofa, both partially clothed, champagne flutes in hand. I rolled my shoulders, as though attempting to physically dismiss the memory. Our guest arrives, Alessandro announced. Please, Mr. Shepherd, be seated, or perhaps you prefer to stand, whatever provides optimal viewing perspective. My God, Nathaniel whispered, and Elizabeth, she simply. She laughed, my voice faltered momentarily, approached me, caressed my face with condescending familiarity. Don't exert yourself unnecessarily, darling. Consider your cardiac condition. Remember the specialist's recommendations. I stared at the darkening Mediterranean without truly seeing it. They derived satisfaction from my humiliation. It transcended infidelity. It represented deliberate, systematic dismantling of everything I considered sacrosanct. I suddenly recognized my accelerated respiration. The discomfort in my chest intensified. I retrieved medication from my pocket, swallowed it with the remaining wine. That evening merely commenced the ordeal. Over the subsequent 2 weeks in Positano, they transformed my existence into carefully orchestrated degradation, required my presence during their dining experiences, their recreational activities, their intimate moments. When I refused, Alessandro referenced my sister's vulnerability. I finished the last of the Brunello. Elizabeth underwent complete transformation. As though she had discarded a persona maintained for 25 years, she appeared rejuvenated, energized, liberated, while I became a diminished approximation of my former self. Chapter 2: Beneath the Surface. I directed my gaze steadily toward Nathaniel. The situation persisted without reprieve. 14 days, Nathaniel. 14 days of methodical debasement. Shared meals where my presence was superfluous. Social engagements where I remained at the periphery. One evening, Alessandro instructed me to deliver refreshments to his private quarters. That moment remained crystallized in my memory. And what proves most revealing about my degraded condition, I complied, announced my presence, entered carrying the requested items. They occupied his bed, made no attempt at modesty. "Place it on the side table, darling," Elizabeth directed. Her inflection contained absolute detachment, as though I represented staff rather than spouse, an inconsequential entity. I observed in silence as Alessandro whispered something to Elizabeth, eliciting genuine, uninhibited laughter, an expression of joy she hadn't shared with me in countless seasons. At that juncture, my self-loathing exceeded my contempt for them, for weakness, for cowardice, for permitting this systematic destruction of dignity. After enduring a week of this holiday, I initiated countermeasures. I continued, monitoring the couple across the terrace. While they pursued their amusements, I activated former professional networks, secure communications, encrypted data transfers. 20 years in intelligence operations establishes connections with individuals who occupy strategically valuable positions. Nathaniel leaned forward with increased engagement. "You conducted an investigation into Alessandro Morti." My initial discovery, his presented identity was fabricated, I confirmed. Alessandro Morti existed as a carefully constructed legend. Falsified documentation, manufactured background, artificial existence. I sipped water, noting its mineral composition. His authentic identity, Stefano Venucci, Sicilian origin, education at London School of Economics, followed by return to Southern Europe. Official capacity, art importer-exporter. Actual function, principal facilitator for arms distribution throughout Mediterranean conflict zones. The network supplying restricted weaponry to North African insurgent groups. Nathaniel inquired with hushed intensity. "Precisely," I acknowledged. However, Alessandro operated above conventional criminality. He functioned as financial architect, strategic planner, the individual who transformed millions in illicit revenue into legitimate enterprise, luxury resorts, fine dining establishments, cultural venues. A significant portion of Amalfi Coast premium properties constructed using capital derived from conflict profiteering. I observed his refined manipulation of stemware, impeccable social presentation, cultivated sophistication. Alessandro transcended mere wealth. He wielded influence. Judicial officials, political figures, law enforcement, all accessible through appropriate incentives. Positano represented his personal dominion. His activities faced no meaningful constraints. I moderated my volume. I discovered surveillance devices throughout our suite. My movements were continuously monitored, not exclusively in common areas, bedroom, bathroom. Privacy ceased to exist. What purpose did this serve? Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "Absolute dominance," I responded simply. "Comprehensive surveillance." He required awareness of my activities, communications, needed certainty that I presented no operational threat. I glanced toward Alessandro seated at the terrace's opposite end. His casual attentiveness to Elizabeth resembled ownership rather than affection. However, surveillance systems operate bidirectionally. Understanding their placement allows manipulation of observers. I adopted behavior suggesting resignation, ceased challenging Elizabeth, executed Alessandro's directives without resistance, portrayed psychological capitulation. I permitted myself a measured smile. Simultaneously, I accumulated intelligence. Nathaniel regarded me with emerging professional respect. Never confront without comprehensive target assessment. I referenced intelligence protocol. As my understanding of Alessandro's operation expanded, the magnitude became apparent. He facilitated hundreds of millions in transactions annually, controlled weapons movement throughout the Mediterranean basin, maintained connections with designated terrorist organizations across multiple jurisdictions. I paused, studying Nathaniel's response. Moreover, he operated with effective immunity. Multiple enforcement operations had failed. Witnesses became unavailable, judicial proceedings collapsed, prosecutorial evidence disappeared. Institutional frameworks had been compromised to protect his interests. With sufficient evidence, surely. What appropriate recipient existed? I asked rhetorically. Local authorities receiving substantial unofficial compensation, federal agencies whose previous efforts had been systematically undermined. I was isolated in foreign territory, with cardiovascular compromise and a wife who had become complicit rather than captive. I shook my head slightly. No, Nathaniel. Occasionally conventional systems prove inadequate. In such circumstances, the individual must become the system, justice personified, retribution embodied. But the truly disturbing element, I redirected my attention toward Elizabeth, was observing my wife's metamorphosis, progressive, daily evolution. Nathaniel maintained attentive silence. Initially, I hypothesized coercion, that her behavior reflected duress, self-preservation. Such circumstances would be comprehensible, potentially forgivable. I recalled my careful observation during those early days, searching for indicators of distress, discomfort, hopping to identify nonverbal signals, help me, rescue me. But with each passing day, evidence mounted that she wasn't victim but volunteer. Furthermore, she appeared to flourish in this new context. I sipped water, detecting metallic undertones perhaps more psychological than physical. The transformation extended beyond appearance. She developed cruelty, derived satisfaction from my humiliation. Each instance when Alessandro initiated physical contact in my presence, she would observe my reaction, cataloging my distress, extracting gratification from my evident psychological injury. How could such transformation occur? Nathaniel asked quietly, after 25 years of shared experience. I repeatedly examined that question, I acknowledged, and gradually discerned patterns. Elizabeth always demonstrated ambition. In medical practice, she consistently sought advancement, recognition. Within our marriage, she perpetually desired expansion, superior residence, prestigious location, exotic experiences. I believed we constructed partnership through mutual contribution. But as years progressed, my career advancement terminated when the fragment migrated toward my heart. Our financial circumstances couldn't support her aspirational lifestyle. At some subconscious level, she began attributing this limitation to my perceived inadequacy. I paused, selecting precise terminology. She never explicitly articulated this perspective, but I recognized her expression when we passed architecturally significant homes, noted her tonal shift when discussing acquaintances whose partners had achieved notable professional success. Elizabeth desired comprehensive fulfillment without delay, while I could only provide modest security on intelligence pension and veterans' benefits. But such limitations weren't self-determined, Nathaniel objected. You sustained injury preserving my father's life. Surely she recognized this sacrifice. She acknowledged it. Once, I smiled with melancholy. But extended care for an injured partner creates cumulative strain, Nathaniel. My physical limitations became her confinement. My ethical framework, her constraint. Her desire for liberation intensified progressively. I registered increasing discomfort in my chest, the fragment providing unwelcome reminder of its presence. On the 5th day of our holiday, she made a revealing statement. We breakfasted at the resort restaurant, a rare moment without Alessandro's presence. I asked directly, why? Why inflict this deliberate cruelty? She regarded me with disturbing serenity. Because opportunity now exists, Raymond. Because I merit superior circumstances than serving as medical companion to an intelligence officer with cardiac compromise. I pressed my palm against my chest, as though attempting to contain the embedded metal through willpower alone. That moment provided clarity. The woman I'd cherished for 25 years had ceased to exist. Perhaps she never truly existed. I had devoted myself to an idealized construction, a sophisticated mirage. The authentic Elizabeth had always been present, awaiting appropriate conditions for emergence. On the 10th day of our Positano residence, inevitability manifested. I continued after momentary reflection. Stress, environmental factors, persistent psychological strain. The fragment shifted. Nathaniel's posture conveyed increased tension. It occurred in their presence, I recounted with clinical detachment, as though describing operational complications rather than personal trauma. Elizabeth insisted I attend a private reception in Alessandro's suite. Positano's influential society, significant wealth, individuals of consequence. I was assigned service functionality, beverage distribution, minor facilitation tasks. I unconsciously clenched my fist, recalling the profound indignity of that evening. Alessandro introduced Elizabeth as his future companion. Elizabeth Venucci, he pronounced, while guests acknowledged with condescending approval. No one expressed concern that her legal husband occupied a peripheral position with service responsibilities. I inhaled deliberately, maintaining cardiovascular regulation. At one juncture, Alessandro requested I retrieve champagne from an adjacent room. I complied, conscious of guests' evaluative observation. Pity, contempt, indifference. These reactions were evident in their expressions. I had become nonentity. My hand instinctively moved toward my heart, recalling the acute discomfort. Upon returning with the requested champagne, I observed Alessandro and Elizabeth engaged in dance, her physical proximity to him, her evident enjoyment. He whispered something in her ear. Then simultaneously they directed attention toward me and laughed with deliberate volume. I had become anecdotal, object of amusement. I swallowed with difficulty, recalling subsequent moments. Then physiological crisis ensued. Initial sensation, burning within the chest cavity, followed by what seemed comparable to heated metal penetrating directly into the heart muscle with rotational force. I released the serving tray. Champagne dispersed across Italian marble. Guests retreated with irritation at potential damage to expensive footwear. I paused, visualizing that moment with preternatural clarity. I collapsed to my knees, respiratory function compromised, visual disturbance manifesting as increasing darkness. Music continued, but with acoustic distortion suggesting underwater transmission. I directed my gaze upward and observed Elizabeth, her expression contained, nothing, as though observing a stranger experiencing medical emergency on a public thoroughfare. Nathaniel leaned forward with increased concern. She made no attempt to provide medical assistance, a trauma specialist with extensive experience. None, I shook my head slightly. She turned away, continued dancing. I heard her comment something to Alessandro. They both responded with laughter. I sipped water, noted minor tremor in my hand. I lay on imported marble approaching death, while they continued their social engagement. Music, champagne, conversation. Their environment continued uninterrupted while I represented merely an inconvenient disruption to their carefully orchestrated evening. I inclined toward Nathaniel, modulating my voice. The curious aspect. In that moment, balance between existence and termination, I experienced extraordinary lucidity, as though perceptual barriers had been removed. I observed reality with unprecedented clarity. I registered increasing discomfort in my chest, engaged breathing techniques, maintained cardiac rhythm. Through some combination of training and survival instinct, I managed to stand. Unnoticed, attention remained focused on the continuing celebration. I navigated to the exit, reached the elevator, eventually our suite. I had nitroglycerin there. It stabilized my condition temporarily. What followed? Nathaniel inquired with quiet intensity. I waited, I stated simply. Reclined on the bed, contemplating imminent mortality, and remarkably, I experienced no fear regarding death itself. My apprehension centered on dying without acquiring complete understanding. Nathaniel's expression reflected confusion. Understanding of what precisely? Elizabeth returned approximately 3 hours after midnight, intoxicated, exhilarated. My conscious state surprised her. She collided with my luggage, expressed profanity. I closed my eyes briefly, recalling each syllable. "You remain alive?" she inquired with the casual indifference one might use when asking about depleted toiletries. I referenced observing her continued dancing while I lay incapacitated. She responded with dismissive gesture. "What alternative existed? Disrupting everyone's evening because of your recurring medical episodes." I allowed silence to emphasize what followed. Then she collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and murmured a statement that transformed everything. "If you would simply expire, we would receive the insurance settlement." Nathaniel regarded me with unconcealed shock. She articulated those precise words. "Divine Providence knows I wish that recollection were false," I confirmed. But those words were irrevocable once spoken. I observed Elizabeth at the terrace's distant end, elegant, radiant, unencumbered. That night provided final confirmation. The woman I had loved for 25 years hadn't merely changed. She anticipated my death. She desired it. The following day, I consulted a medical specialist. I continued, maintaining visual contact with the couple at their distant table. A local cardiologist verified my self-diagnosis. The fragment had migrated approximately 2 millimeters. The next cardiovascular event would likely result in aortic perforation. My remaining lifespan consisted of weeks rather than months or years. I smiled without conveying joy. Curious psychological phenomenon. When mortality becomes quantifiably imminent, priorities achieve remarkable clarity. Apprehension diminishes, replaced by purpose and precision. I moderated my volume, though distance rendered eavesdropping impossible. I returned to accommodations with altered perspective, ceased resistance, suppressed emotional response, became shadow-like, imperceptible, inconsequential. This approach proved effective. Alessandro and Elizabeth relaxed vigilance, ceased regarding me as potential threat. I became effectively furniture, environmental component. I paused, selecting appropriate phrasing. One evening, they dispatched me to procure a particular vintage. I intentionally extended this errand, recognizing their preoccupation would prevent monitoring my delay. Upon return, the office door remained partially open. I experienced renewed indignation, controlled, calculated. They were reviewing documentation at his desk, schematics, geographical coordinates, photographic intelligence. Elizabeth provided detailed explanation regarding some facility layout. Alessandro listened with concentration, documenting key points. I established direct eye contact with Nathaniel. Initially, I failed to comprehend the situation's significance, presumed connection to legitimate business operations. Then I detected specific terminology, military installation designations, storage facility coordinates, transportation security protocols. Nathaniel visibly paled. She was providing classified information to arms traffickers. I nodded, experiencing renewed bitterness. Elizabeth's position at the Veterans Support Organization provided access to military logistics data, personnel movement schedules. Not highest classification level, but valuable to individuals with appropriate application methodology. I accessed my phone, located specific video documentation, directed the screen toward Nathaniel. The recording showed Elizabeth transferring documentation to Alessandro, her voice subdued but distinct. Coordinates for the Naples Naval Support Facility. Security rotation occurs at midnight. 15-minute vulnerability interval between shifts. I terminated playback before displaying Alessandro's expression of gratitude toward Elizabeth, a prolonged embrace of disturbing intimacy. Approximately 1 week following this conversation, the facility experienced security breach. 2 personnel sustained fatal injuries. Restricted equipment valued at approximately 1.7 million euros disappeared. Nathaniel regarded me with undisguised horror. This constitutes treason against NATO allies. Precisely, I confirmed. And through inaction I became accessory. By permitting continuation, I enabled additional compromise. My hand formed reflexive fist. At that juncture, comprehension crystallized. This transcended personal betrayal. Elizabeth had traversed an irrevocable boundary. She represented active threat to international security infrastructure, and Alessandro employed her as operational asset. I observed them, their cultivated appearance, their social sophistication. I began documenting their interactions, photographing sensitive materials, compiling evidence, not merely for personal validation, for appropriate authorities, for eventual justice. Why not immediately contact intelligence services? Nathaniel questioned. From Positano, I responded with subtle derision, where law enforcement maintained financial relationships with Alessandro's organization, where his influence could eliminate evidence through single communication. No, methodical approach was required, assembling irrefutable documentation, creating evidence package immune to manipulation or destruction. I experienced renewed discomfort in my chest, unwelcome reminder of diminishing chronology. Our 14 days in Positano concluded, I resumed after momentary pause. We returned to our residence, the modest home in Connecticut with traditional architecture that Elizabeth had once appreciated. I gazed beyond Nathaniel, into recollection. Most perplexing aspect, she maintained perfect simulation of normalcy, prepared meals, inquired about my well-being, monitored medication regimen, the exemplary spouse superficially. I shook my head slightly. But this represented mere performance, facade, a character she portrayed during our interactions. Nighttime activities revealed truth, electronic communications with Alessandro, arrangement of meetings, continued intelligence transfer. I spoke quietly, each word laden with contained emotion. I installed surveillance in our residence, not from jealousy, her infidelity was established fact, for evidentiary purposes, and I observed her authentic self. When believing herself unobserved, her expression transformed. The performed concern, affection disappeared, revealed calculation and purpose. Nathaniel's brow furrowed. And Alessandro, he visited American territory. Monthly, I confirmed. Under business travel pretense, Elizabeth would arrange professional absence. They would convene at luxury accommodation in Manhattan. She would return to our shared residence and occupy our bed as though nothing of significance had transpired. I unconsciously clenched my jaw. But this wasn't the most disturbing revelation. One afternoon I returned unexpectedly early. Elizabeth occupied the home office, engaged in telephone conversation. I detected a specific name, Martin Blackwell, divorce attorney renowned for aggressive client advocacy. I paused, recalling each word of that conversation. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, his condition is terminal. Medical prognosis suggests maximum 12 to 24 months survivability. No improvement possibility doesn't exist. I require certainty regarding comprehensive asset transfer, residence, financial accounts, insurance benefits. He demonstrates decision-making impairment, financial management incapacity. What? No dependence, therefore no complicating factors. I returned attention to Nathaniel. 25 years of partnership, Nathaniel. 25 years I cherished this woman, provided for her, integrated our lives. Yet she methodically orchestrated acquisition of everything I had earned through service and sacrifice, preparing to declare my incompetence to gain control of my financial resources before my actual death. I experienced intensifying resolve, not impulsive, emotional response but coldly rational determination. That day I reached decision. Elizabeth must face consequences for her betrayal, not exclusively to me, to legal authority, to national security she compromised. Alessandro required neutralization, his trafficking network dismantled, and I must restore honor before the fragment completes its inexorable journey. I developed comprehensive strategy, meticulous, detailed, created incontrovertible documentation. I addressed Nathaniel directly. 3 weeks passed, I consulted Dr. Rosenthal. He confirmed my physical assessment. The fragment had continued migration. The next cardiac event would likely prove terminal, maximum 30 days remaining. I permitted myself subtle smile. The remarkable aspect, I experienced profound relief. For the first time in 18 months, I possessed absolute clarity of purpose. I understood precisely what required completion before the fragment achieved its ultimate objective. I reduced volume further. I withheld diagnostic information from Elizabeth, allowed her presumption of extended timeline, the belief that her methodical plan retained viability. I assembled necessary resources, documentation, evidence, and traveled here to Positano, the location where everything transformed 18 months ago. For what purpose? Nathaniel inquired softly. To conclude unfinished business, I responded with simplicity. To restore justice, to reclaim personal honor. They remain unaware of my presence, I stated quietly. Temporarily, but imminent discovery approaches, and then. At that precise moment, my telephone indicated incoming communication. I observed the display message from Elizabeth. Brief, conveying concern. Raymond, your location. I noticed removal of personal items from residence. Please explain circumstances. I displayed the message to Nathaniel. The endgame commences. Now I require your assistance. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Justice. My accommodation presented deliberate modesty, standard dimensions, conventional furnishings. This selection provided advantage. Neither Elizabeth nor Alessandro would anticipate my presence in such surroundings. They would expect someone with intelligence background to secure enhanced security measures, potentially in separate location entirely. But optimal concealment often requires integration rather than isolation. Ordinariness. Invisibility within normality. I adjusted the window covering, activated subdued lighting, creating intentional contrast between illumination and shadow. Nathaniel occupied the singular armchair while I positioned myself on the bed's edge. Fatigue accumulated. International travel combined with emotional intensity extracted physiological cost, but restoration remained unavailable. Not currently. 3 weeks passed, I received definitive medical assessment, I began, unfastening shirt buttons to mid-chest. You recall reference to Dr. Rosenthal. Nathaniel acknowledged with slight nod. Preeminent cardiovascular specialist in northeastern region. Previous military medical experience in Syrian conflict zones. If intervention possibility existed, he represented optimal resource. I withdrew from inner pocket formal medical documentation, unfolded with care, presented to Nathaniel. He scanned content efficiently, focusing on concluding paragraph. With subsequent fragment migration, probability of aortic wall compromise calculated at 96%. Palliative care protocol recommended. Anticipated survival duration, approximately 28 to 35 days, he read aloud. Raymond, perhaps alternative medical consultation might prove beneficial. Contemporary medical technology advances continuously. Multiple consultations completed, I interrupted with certainty. 3 distinguished cardiovascular surgeons. Unanimous conclusion, surgical intervention presents unacceptable risk. Mortality probability approaches statistical certainty at 97%. I reclaimed the documentation, refolded with precision, returned to pocket. Can you comprehend existence with cardiac embedded ordnance, Nathaniel? Each heartbeat serves as reminder of temporal limitation. Each respiratory irregularity prompts mortality contemplation. 12 years I've maintained precarious equilibrium, hopping to achieve meaningful existence before inevitable conclusion. I rose, approached the window, adjusted covering minutely. Below, resort illumination created warmth, uninhibited conversation from dining terrace carried upward. Medical authorities recommended extreme caution, avoidance of physical exertion, emotional intensity, all stressors, regulated, controlled existence, and remarkably I embraced these constraints. For Elizabeth, I smiled with irony, believed our connection warranted such sacrifice. I released the blind, turned toward Nathaniel. When mortality parameters become defined, priority assessment undergoes transformation. What generated apprehension throughout these years? Death itself? No. Apprehension centered on incompletion, not witnessing children's development, children that remained theoretical, not experiencing shared aging with a partner who, apparently, anticipated my death with impatience, not creating lasting contribution. I initiated measured packing, established behavioral pattern assisting cognitive organization. Following Rosenthal's consultation, I experienced extended wakefulness, observed Elizabeth's unconscious respiration, contemplating what constitutes genuine significance, what requires completion during remaining temporal allocation. I halted, addressed Nathaniel directly. Response manifested with extraordinary clarity. Justice restoration, ensuring betrayal receives appropriate consequence, departing existence with dignity, according to personal determination, rather than experiencing deterioration in institutional environment while my wife calculates insurance disbursement timeframe. Nathaniel maintained silence, his expression revealing emotional complexity, compassion, uncertainty, growing comprehension. Raymond, he finally spoke, your description suggests retribution or justice within established parameters. Can separation between these concepts truly exist? I responded rhetorically. Retribution without justice represents mere brutality. Justice without consequence, philosophical abstraction. I desire their accountability before legal authority. I intend public exposure of their authentic nature. I approached my luggage, opened with deliberation. Beneath precisely arranged clothing rested a military-grade security case, compact yet substantially constructed. I extracted it, placed it upon the bed. I've reached resolution, Nathaniel. Either terminate existence as passive observer to systematic destruction, or depart according to personal determination, preserving fundamental honor. Your father selected the latter approach, as shall I. I opened the metal container. Inside resided objects of personal significance, not material value but profound meaning. Military identification, mine and William Collins. Photograph of our operational team in Damascus, edges softened through frequent handling. Correspondence from families of personnel whose lives our team had preserved. Sincere expressions of gratitude handwritten. And a firearm. Sig Sauer P226 standard intelligence issue. Substantial, reliable, historically validated. This represented my initial field weapon. I lifted the firearm, experiencing familiar balance and weight. It accompanied me through Beirut operations. Previously, my mentor carried it through Balkan interventions. I positioned the weapon carefully upon the bed. My instructor transferred it upon my first field assignment. Stated, Shepard, I hope necessity never arises for this. Should requirement emerge, remember each discharge represents selection between honor and its absence. I regarded the firearm, acknowledging its silent presence. Veteran operative prepared for final mission. It remained secured, not deployed in Damascus, maintained in residential safe. Symbolic reminder of obligation and principle. The singular occasion I contemplated its utilization, 18 months previous, in Positano, upon initial observation of Elizabeth with Alessandro, but resolution proved insufficient. I redirected attention to Nathaniel. Current circumstances dictate specific action. Tonight concludes this sequence. However, I require your participation, Nathaniel. He adjusted posture, straightening. What specific function do you envision for me? Not direct involvement in potential mortality, if that generates concern. I permitted subtle facial relaxation. Your ethical framework reflects your father's too accurately for such participation. I need you as witness, justice's ocular and auditory representative. I extracted from the case a secure digital storage device. This contains comprehensive documentation, video surveillance of their interactions, documents Elizabeth provided to trafficking operations, financial records confirming transfers, sufficient evidence for extended incarceration of both individuals. However, complication exists. What specific complication? Nathaniel inquired. Alessandro's extensive influence. His communication can eliminate evidence. Witnesses can recant testimony. Judicial officials can recuse themselves citing medical necessity. We require something more definitive. I reduced proximity. Tonight they convene on private beach, the location where events initiated 18 months ago. They commemorate their association, I articulated with evident distaste. Intimate celebration of their relationship's commencement, 18 months since they systematically dismantled my existence. How have you acquired this information? I maintain specific information sources, I explained with professional understatement. Financial resources can secure not merely allegiance but its opposite. One of Alessandro's security personnel experienced similar dishonor. He provided operational details and schedule. I repositioned to seated posture. I require comprehensive recording of forthcoming events. You'll maintain concealed position without intervention. Documentation clear, complete, unmodified. Evidence beyond potential challenge. I regarded him with professional intensity. Upon conclusion, you'll transmit materials to specific recipients. Intelligence services, international law enforcement, primary media organizations. Simultaneous distribution, preventing suppression. Nathaniel remained silent, internal evaluation evident. I recognized his ethical consideration. I comprehend your hesitation, I acknowledged quietly. You perceive potential impropriety. Consider alternative approaches through established channels. Do such alternatives not exist? He questioned. For individuals of Alessandro's category, I responded negatively. He operates beyond conventional parameters. Legal frameworks represent tools rather than limitations. His influence extends throughout this region, with connections in diplomatic circles. What can institutional approaches achieve against such opponents? I exhaled measuredly. And Elizabeth, she would navigate accountability, portray herself as coerced participant, identify escape pathway. Her manipulation skills remain formidable. I inspected the firearm, confirmed operational readiness. However, my intention excludes their termination if that represents your concern. I seek justice, not bloodshed. Then what precise strategy have you developed? Nathaniel regarded me with professional skepticism. To extract confession, documented, public, all operational details regarding trafficking network, intelligence compromise, discussions regarding my elimination, And subsequently, I introduced intentional pause. I shall determine my own conclusion independently. I established direct visual contact. I require your assistance, Nathaniel, not for personal benefit, for justice implementation, for truth preservation, for honoring your father's memory. Extended silence followed as he evaluated my expression, apparently seeking responses to unspoken inquiries. Eventually, he provided measured acknowledgement. I'll provide requested assistance, Raymond, limited to documentation, excluding physical confrontation, excluding termination. You have my assurance. I extended my hand. My exclusive objective is truth. Subsequent developments remain their responsibility. We formalized agreement through handshake ritual, and I experienced partial psychological unburdening. William Collins' son, exhibiting identical integrity and directness, worthy successor. I presented hand-drafted topographical representation of the beach location, amateur execution, but functionally accurate. Red circular designation indicated isolated cove between rock formations, the precise location where Alessandro and Elizabeth had arranged their meeting. They will arrive at approximately midnight. I indicated the designation. Private location, protected from observation. The identical setting where Alessandro initially brought Elizabeth 18 months ago. Nathaniel examined the diagram with professional attention. What access routes exist? Dual approaches. I traced linear representations. Primary path which they will utilize. Secondary route along elevated rock formation, more challenging navigationally but unobservable from primary beach location. We shall proceed via secondary route. I designated additional position, a rock outcropping with strategic advantage. You'll occupy this position. Optimal documentation location, unobstructed visual field while maintaining concealment. Maintain shadow positioning, eliminate noise generation, exclude illumination. I retrieved specialized recording equipment from luggage. Military specification, infrared capability, image stabilization, directional audio acquisition, will capture vocalization despite ambient ocean acoustics. Nathaniel examined the equipment, assessing functionality. Your preparation appears comprehensive. I've had 18 months to evaluate all variables, I confirmed. Each movement, each statement. I understand their psychological response patterns. I've identified vulnerability points. I designated additional position, my planned emergence location. I'll approach from this vector. They anticipate isolation, particularly from this direction. Psychological advantage through surprise element. Nathaniel's expression indicated concern. If they maintain armed status. They will, I confirmed. Alessandro consistently carries ankle-positioned firearm. Glock 26, 10-round capacity, right-side safety mechanism. Compact but limited effective range. I permitted subtle expression of irony. Curious contradiction. Elizabeth historically expressed opposition to firearms, described them as instruments of barbarism, unsuitable for civilized society. Yet for Alessandro, she created exception to this principle. This approach contains significant risk, Nathaniel objected. If they initiate defensive fire, that represents low probability outcome, I stated with professional certainty. At least initially, Alessandro's psychological profile indicates excessive self-assurance. He'll believe verbal manipulation remains viable. And Elizabeth, I experienced momentary hesitation. She retained sufficient personal history to preclude immediate lethal response. Nathaniel maintained skeptical expression, but withheld further objection. Upon my appearance, I'll initiate controlled conversation, I continued. Apply pressure to psychological vulnerability points, induce disclosure, confession. All elements require documentation, every statement, every nonverbal indication. I directed attention to the firearm. If strategic approach proceeds according to parameters, they will self-incriminate. They will provide comprehensive admission of criminal activity. If alternative outcome develops, Nathaniel inquired quietly. I considered optimal response formulation. Then I shall present ultimatum, confession or consequences. What specific consequences? All accumulated evidence from 18 months investigation, I indicated the storage device. Sufficient for their complete destruction, perhaps less immediate and less public than my preference, but equivalently effective in ultimate outcome. Nathaniel maintained careful observation. And subsequent to their confession, I returned his direct gaze. Then I complete my mission. They face arrest, judicial process, conviction, and I depart according to personal determination. You suggest, Nathaniel began. This represents my independent decision, I interrupted with finality. Mine exclusively. I neither request your endorsement nor your participation, merely your witness function regarding factual documentation. Silence descended. We both comprehended the inevitable trajectory, though refrained from explicit articulation. The subsequent hour we dedicated to final preparation. I recorded concluding statement explaining my actions and underlying motivation. Utilized the same equipment Nathaniel would operate. Concise, factual, emotionally regulated, essential information, identification, chronology. All elements necessary for continued investigation by appropriate authorities. If you're reviewing this content, I addressed potential viewers, my existence has concluded. However, my termination serves meaningful purpose. I delivered information with professional precision, as though providing operational briefing. Detailed Alessandro's network, financial mechanisms, weapons distribution infrastructure. Elizabeth's role in classified information transfer, attacks on Allied military installations facilitated through her betrayal. Nathaniel observed without interruption. Upon recording completion, he asked single question. You maintain absolute certainty regarding this course? Without reservation, I confirmed, deactivating equipment. This represents the exclusive methodology guaranteeing truth exposure. Subsequently, I prepared 2 sealed communications. First contained formal statement for intelligence services, detailed report regarding Alessandro's operations, including identification, chronology, financial accounts, reproductions of documents Elizabeth had transferred, photographic evidence of meetings with designated arms dealers, sufficient material to initiate international investigation resistant to manipulation. Second communication addressed Elizabeth personally. It contained evidence of her betrayal, not exclusively of marriage but of national security principles we both had pledged to uphold. Photographic evidence, correspondence, recorded communications, and brief personal statement. You exchanged your integrity and my devotion for illusory luxury. I trust this transaction proves satisfactory. I extended both communications to Nathaniel. Following conclusion, deliver first communication to appropriate authorities, second to Elizabeth. Personal transmission required. He accepted the materials with evident reservation. You represent the exclusive individual worthy of this responsibility. William Collins' son, individual with equivalent commitment to principle. Nathaniel secured the storage device within his possession. You recognize the significance of your request to function as accessory. Not accessory but witness, I corrected. Guardian of factual record, individual preventing historical revision according to powerful interests. I maintained unwavering eye contact. Acceptable, Nathaniel eventually stated, for truth preservation. Appreciation, I responded with simplicity. I removed the wall-mounted mirror, positioned it upon the bed, retrieved from case precision grooming implements, prepared straight razor. "What activity are you undertaking?" Nathaniel inquired. "Preparation," I met his reflection in the mirror. "You understand military protocol. Maintain appropriate appearance regardless of circumstance. I shall not confront destiny in disheveled condition." I applied traditional lather to facial area, began methodical removal of accumulated stubble. Deliberate, precise movements without unnecessary acceleration, maintaining professional standards. "Your composure appears remarkable," Nathaniel observed. "Because clarity has replaced uncertainty," I continued grooming procedure. "For the first time in 18 months, I possess definitive understanding, purpose, comprehension regarding remaining function." Upon completing grooming, I selected appropriate attire, crisp white shirt, maintained to professional standard, identical to those worn during significant operational deployments. "Final deployment," I commented quietly, securing buttons. "Appearance standards must be maintained." We departed accommodation at 23:30, utilizing transportation service to nearest coastal access point. From that position continued on foot, narrow elevation path alongside rock formations, minimally visible in lunar illumination. Ocean acoustics provided ideal audio concealment to our right. I navigated with confidence despite limited visibility. Every pathway transition, every elevation change had been memorized during extensive preparation for this operation. Nathaniel followed with professional discipline, periodically confirming equipment security within his pack. At 23:50, we achieved elevated rocky position overlooking Small Cove. Optimal surveillance location, concealed within shadow while maintaining clear visual acquisition of sandy beach below. I indicated Nathaniel's position using minimal gesture, then retrieved compact optical enhancement device. They had already arrived. Alessandro had arranged natural fiber ground covering, established portable dining surface, champagne in cooling apparatus, crystal stemware, illumination creating intimate perimeter, optimized romantic environment. Elizabeth seated nearby, but her postural configuration revealed tension, elevated shoulder position, spinal rigidity, continual environmental scanning. "They demonstrate anxiety," I whispered, transferring optical device to Nathaniel. "Particularly Elizabeth, she anticipates my presence." Nathaniel utilized the optical enhancement briefly, before returning it. "Alessandro maintains armed status," he confirmed quietly. "Ankle position as you predicted." "Additional weapon beneath ground covering," I added. "He maintains distrust of compact firearms for significant operations." I continued observation for additional minutes. Alessandro distributed champagne, proposed ceremonial toast. They consumed, but without evident enthusiasm. Mechanical participation in established ritual. "Execution phase initiates," I addressed Nathaniel. "Maintain shadow position, avoid intervention regardless of developments. Document everything." I extended my hand. "If operational parameters deteriorate, inform Rosenthal his assessment proved accurate. The fragment ultimately achieved its objective." Nathaniel returned firm handshake. "Operational success, Raymond." I acknowledged, then began descent via narrow pathway circumnavigating rock formation. Strategic approach, emerge from Eastern Cove boundary, representing minimal expectation zone for potential observers. Utilize surprise element for psychological advantage. Lunar reflection upon water created variable illumination patterns across the sand. Ocean acoustics masked footfall sounds. I advanced with measured pace, methodical progression, as during field operations. Respiration controlled, cardiovascular function regulated, cognitive processes optimized. During approach, I detected conversation fragments. "Unnecessary concern reaction," Alessandro stated. He represents aging intelligence operative with cardiovascular compromise. What capability remains? You maintain insufficient understanding. Elizabeth's voice conveyed tension. Raymond operates with exceptional determination. If he indicated presence here, then appropriate reception awaits. Alessandro produced laughter lacking authentic amusement. Surprise arrangement for your husband. I paused behind substantial rock formation, final concealment before open beach exposure. Confirmed firearm accessibility, operational readiness. Implemented controlled breathing pattern. Final operational phase veteran, I acknowledged internally. Maintain professional standard. I emerged into illuminated area. Good evening, I projected voice with controlled volume. I trust my arrival doesn't disrupt your commemoration. Both responded with immediate movement. Alessandro with professional efficiency, hand already seeking ankle position. Elizabeth with delayed reaction, complexion demonstrating reduced circulation in lunar illumination. Raymond, she whispered. How considerate to join our celebration, Mr. Shepherd. Alessandro rapidly re-established composure, displaying practiced social smile. Champagne, we're acknowledging a significant anniversary. I maintain awareness. I advanced one additional step. 18 months since the systematic dismantling of my personal and professional existence, indeed worthy of commemoration. I established position several meters from their location, at illumination perimeter. Optimal distance, permitting clear communication while maintaining tactical advantage. Please stand, I instructed with minimal volume, both individuals. Alessandro produced theatrical amusement, extending arms in expansive gesture. Observe this unprecedented assertiveness. Our reluctant observer suddenly demonstrates authority. Darling, your timing demonstrates perfect synchronicity. Elizabeth attempted nervous smile. We were preparing to initiate. Stand immediately, I repeated, producing the firearm. Current instruction. Alessandro's social facade dissolved. They rose slowly, observing the weapon with appropriate caution. Let's maintain rational approach, Raymond. Elizabeth raised hands in conciliatory gesture. Communication can resolve this situation. All circumstances permit resolution. Indeed, comprehensive discussion shall occur. I advanced one additional step. We shall engage in exceptionally informative conversation. I observed them, confined, cornered, beginning to recognize that current circumstances would not proceed according to their anticipated scenario. The discussion commences immediately. Chapter 4: The Weight of Honor. The firearm I held carried significance beyond its mechanical function. It represented lineage, professional tradition, and responsibility. Multiple generations of intelligence officers had carried similar weapons when confronting ultimate decisions. Tonight I joined their ranks. Ocean acoustics eliminated peripheral sounds, isolating our voices in this secluded cove. The night sky, illuminated by stars and near full moon, observed with cosmic indifference as 3 human lives converged in this isolated location, lives connected through betrayal, psychological damage, and inevitable consequence. Nathaniel's recording equipment captured everything from concealed position within the rock formation. Silent witness to unfolding human tragedy. Raymond, secure your weapon. Elizabeth's voice fluctuated, revealing complex psychological state. Apprehension certainly, but underlying calculation remained evident. The professional manipulator assessing available leverage. This approach resolves nothing. Discussion remains viable. Alessandro maintained controlled posture, arms positioned for apparent cooperation. His movements demonstrated professional quality, measured, deliberate, continuously evaluating tactical options. Consider her recommendation, amico. He maintained practiced charm despite situational deterioration. Let's interact as civilized individuals. Share refreshment. He gestured toward champagne. Identify mutually beneficial resolution. Mutually beneficial resolution. I maintained weapon position. 18 months. 18 months of systematic degradation. 18 months observing my personal destruction, betrayal of national security, dishonoring of professional service. And you propose discussion. I advanced into the illuminated perimeter, my features now equally visible to them as theirs to me. Very well, discussion shall proceed. My voice maintained professional control. Beginning with you, Alessandro, or perhaps I should address you as Stefano Venucci. Acknowledge that you aren't an art dealer from Milan, but principal logistics coordinator for Mediterranean Arms Distribution Network. Alessandro's musculature tensed perceptibly, social facade diminishing. I don't recognize your referenced identity, Mr. Shepard. Some misunderstanding has occurred. Misunderstanding. I produced abbreviated, humorless laugh. Similar to the misunderstanding that resulted in 2 security personnel fatalities at the Naples support facility following my wife's provision of security protocols. Another misunderstanding. Elizabeth visibly lost circulation, retreated 1 step. Raymond, you're experiencing confusion. Your cardiac condition, medication regimen. Cease immediately, I interrupted, experiencing controlled anger penetrating professional detachment. Do not employ my medical condition as deflection mechanism. I observed everything, documented everything. I possess evidence regarding each criminal transaction. I consulted timepiece, precisely midnight. Appropriate. Time itself appeared to demand accountability from its abusers. What follows this confrontation? Alessandro inquired, maintaining external composure though subtle indicators suggested increasing tactical calculation. You intend our termination. Surely you recognize such action precludes your survival. I maintain no expectation of survival, I responded with professional candor. Medical assessment provides approximately 4 weeks remaining. The next cardiac event will cause the fragment to penetrate the aortic wall. Exsanguination will occur within minutes. Consequently, death holds no particular apprehension. What I fear is departing existence without justice restoration. Elizabeth advanced 1 step, eyes producing tears with remarkable theatrical timing. Performance always represented her exceptional capability. Beloved, why withhold this diagnosis? I could have. We could have consulted superior medical resources. You would have accelerated existing plans, I responded with clinical detachment. Expedited divorce proceedings, accelerated incompetence allegations, hastened appropriation of my accumulated resources. She halted, sympathetic portrayal momentarily revealing authentic calculation beneath. I don't comprehend your implication. Martin Blackwell, divorce attorney, I maintained unwavering observation. Yes, Mr. Blackwell, his condition is terminal. Medical assessment indicates maximum 12 to 24 months. No, improvement possibility doesn't exist. I require certainty regarding comprehensive asset transfer, residence, financial accounts, insurance benefits. Elizabeth retreated, as though physically impacted. You conducted surveillance of me. And you compromised national security, I countered, which represents greater transgression from ethical perspective. Alessandro produced laughter, lacking authentic amusement. Impressive theatrical presentation, Mr. Shepard. However, your accusations lack substantiation. You possess no actionable evidence, merely claims from terminal, emotionally compromised spouse. Evidence exists in comprehensive form. I indicated the rock formation where Nathaniel maintained position. Current events undergo documentation. Additionally, I possess recordings of your meetings throughout 18 months, documents Elizabeth transferred, financial records, identities, chronology, complete operational details. I paused, observing Alessandro's confidence experiencing subtle erosion. Incidentally, how proceeds your negotiation with Ibrahim Nassar? Still attempting to resolve that unfortunate delivery complication in North Africa. This represented calculated assessment. I possessed verified intelligence that Ibrahim Nassar maintained supply relationship with Alessandro and encountered significant logistical failure during recent operations. Information from reliable source. Alessandro's involuntary physical response confirmed accuracy. You possess nothing of consequence. Alessandro attempted reassertion of control, though conviction had diminished noticeably. You're employing deception tactics. Indeed, I permitted subtle smile. Then explain your continued hesitation regarding ankle-holstered weapon retrieval. Glock 26, 10-round capacity, right-side safety mechanism. Compact but tactical compromise at extended range. His facial expression registered increased tension. I continued. Similarly, disregard the secondary weapon beneath ground covering. Beretta 92, 15-round capacity. Superior functionality but access requires extended movement sequence. I would neutralize you before completion. I observed internal conflict, predatory instinct versus analytical calculation that had constructed his criminal enterprise. What precisely do you want? He eventually inquired. Financial compensation, specify amount. Your contaminated resources hold no value for me, I dismissed with minimal gesture. I require truth, confession, recorded, detailing everything, arms distribution network, operational methodology, intelligence Elizabeth provided, complete disclosure. He evaluated me with professional assessment, then unexpectedly produced authentic laughter. And your expectation suggests I simply provide comprehensive confession under duress from firearm threat. Precisely that scenario, I confirmed with professional certainty. Alternatively, face complete organizational destruction. All evidence I've methodically accumulated will transfer to intelligence services, international law enforcement, major media organizations. Complete identification of business partners, political protection sources, compromised judicial contacts. Even should you terminate me, information distribution remains guaranteed. Mechanism has been initiated. I observed his tactical assessment process. Alessandro had constructed criminal infrastructure through exceptional risk evaluation capability. You suggest absence of alternatives, he stated with measured calculation. Alternatives always exist, I corrected. However, some options present superior outcomes compared to others. Alessandro directed attention toward Elizabeth, then returned focus to me. Subsequently executed sudden movement, hand directing toward ankle position. I discharged weapon without hesitation. Professional response from extensive training, 2 rounds, center mass targeting. He collapsed, clutching thoracic region. Elizabeth produced high-volume vocal response, attempting to increase distance from Alessandro's prone form. No, no, Raymond, please. Her hands demonstrated instability, cosmetic application compromised by lacrimal response. I redirected the weapon toward her position. Maintain position, sit. Now your obligation, Elizabeth. I addressed the woman who once represented the entirety of my emotional existence. Respond to primary inquiry. Why? What action or inaction on my part warranted this comprehensive betrayal? She occupied seated position on sand, experiencing full-body tremor. Alessandro's blood gradually saturated the beach material adjacent to her location. Uncertainty exists. Her vocalization barely exceeded audible threshold. He projected such authority, confidence. In his presence, I experienced rejuvenation, desirability. And regarding me, I inquired with measured tone, did 25 years of partnership hold no significance? Significance existed. I provide solemn assurance. She advanced toward me in supplicant posture. I experienced temporary psychological aberration, directional confusion. Raymond, beloved, provide opportunity for rectification. I observed her with clinical detachment, seeking evidence of authentic remorse in her expression. I identified only self-preservation instinct, not concern for me, exclusively for herself. Rectification, I responded negatively. Recall your statement during my cardiac episode at social gathering. If his death occurs, insurance benefits become available. Elizabeth ceased movement. Something transformed in her expression, pretense abandoned completely. Before me sat the authentic Elizabeth, the individual I had never truly comprehended. What alternative existed? Her voice acquired unexpected hardness. You represent comprehensive failure, perpetually recounting intelligence operations, consistently demonstrating professional obsolescence. She rose, removing sand particles from her clothing. Fear disappeared, replaced by accumulated resentment apparently developing across years. And my allocation, vacant residence, absence of progeny, interminable anticipation, continuous concern regarding your cardiac condition, your recurring medical episodes. I functioned as medical professional during employment and domestic existence. You transformed my life into perpetual medical facility. Continue disclosure, I instructed with professional detachment, maintaining weapon readiness. Complete truth required. Yes, emotional attachment to him developed, she exclaimed, indicating Alessandro's immobile form. Appreciated his methodology regarding your humiliation, your situational placement. You represent insignificance, physically compromised, helplessly observing our interaction. Curious smile developed, almost affectionate in quality. Now I perceive your authentic nature, appreciation for honesty. I lowered weapon position but maintained readiness. Lunar illumination created exceptional visibility across the Mediterranean surface, appropriate conditions for concluding life sequence. The ironic element, I inquired, directing attention toward astronomical rather than human features. I maintained emotional connection, consistently hoped your behavior reflected external pressure, self-preservation response, that the woman who shared 25 years couldn't voluntarily betray everything we mutually valued. I redirected attention toward her. But erroneous assessment occurred. Adjacent to me perpetually existed different Elizabeth, cold, calculating, awaiting appropriate circumstances for betrayal implementation. What subsequent action? She inquired, her voice demonstrating neither contrition nor regret, merely tactical evaluation. Now I complete operational objectives. I positioned weapon against temporal region. Negative. Elizabeth unexpectedly advanced toward my position. You cannot implement unilateral termination. Why not proceed? I inquired with professional detachment. I experience terminal condition. Fragment will cause cessation regardless of current action. I prohibit this action. She produced high-volume vocalization. You cannot abandon me. Only then did comprehension occur. This response reflected neither emotional attachment nor concern. She feared control loss, feared my departure according to personal determination, eliminating her final influence, her terminal authority regarding me. Farewell, Elizabeth. I activated discharge mechanism. The acoustic effect proved substantial in the coastal environment. Pain existed momentarily, then consciousness terminated. Darkness provided final resolution. Nathaniel Collins emerged from rock formation concealment, stopping adjacent to Elizabeth, who remained immobilized from psychological shock. She maintained position between two terminated individuals, gaze fixed on undefined distance. What is your identity? She experienced physical instability, unable to focus visual acquisition. The individual who will ensure truth dissemination. He extended sealed communication toward her. simultaneously initiating digital content transfer to secure storage. Review your electronic communications, Mrs. Shepard, and information distribution channels. Shortly, substantial information regarding you and your associate will achieve public awareness. He turned to depart. Extended incarceration represents inevitable outcome. Law enforcement acoustics became audible at increasing proximity, approaching the beach location. Video content achieved viral distribution status, millions of viewing instances within initial 24-hour period. Raymond's accumulated evidence demonstrated unimpeachable quality. Identifications, chronology, financial documentation, interaction recordings. Alessandro's organizational influence proved insufficient against overwhelming evidence dissemination. Federal authorities executed Dawn warrant at Elizabeth's residence, discovered concealed documentation repository and digital storage devices. During judicial proceedings, when prosecution presented recording of her statement during Raymond's cardiac episode, psychological composure disintegrated. The defendant, Elizabeth Shepard, for crimes including treason, material support for designated organizations, complicity in security personnel fatalities, and classified information compromise, is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole eligibility. Nathaniel observed her removal from judicial chambers, previously sophisticated individual reduced to institutional existence in standard-issue attire. Occasionally, he reviewed federal correctional database, gaunt appearance, vacant expression, assigned to institutional laundry operations, processing other inmates' garments. Correctional staff reported frequent nocturnal distress vocalization from her assigned cell. Raymond received military honors during interment at National Cemetery. Nathaniel maintained position at graveside, recalling their terrace conversation. He had fulfilled commitment, distributed factual record, transferred evidence, ensured justice implementation. Financial resources from Raymond's estate established Veteran Support Foundation, assisting intelligence community members transitioning to civilian existence. Nathaniel, inspired by Raymond's principles and his father's example, completed intelligence training, specializing in counterproliferation operations. He eventually had a daughter, named Willow, in subtle acknowledgement of his father William. Raymond's simple memorial stone contained inscription that became foundation motto and Nathaniel's professional philosophy. Honor endures beyond all circumstances. If this narrative resonated with you, please support through subscription and share your reflections in the comments section. Appreciation for your engagement.